Somewhere on a dairy farm right now, a cow is chewing quietly and without meaning to, contributing to climate change. Not through a car exhaust, not through a factory chimney. Through a burp. That single, ordinary burp carries an invisible gas called methane, and it happens roughly every minute or two, all day, every day, for every cow on the planet. Multiply that by hundreds of millions of animals worldwide, and you get one of the least talked about drivers of global warming. So how big a deal is this, really? Cattle, sheep, and other ruminant animals are estimated to be responsible for around 5% of every greenhouse gas emission caused by humans on Earth. Methane released simply through digestion, what scientists call enteric methane, makes up 44% of that livestock share, more than manure, more than transporting animals, more than anything else in the supply chain. And the herds keep growing. The world's ruminant population grew by 66% between 1960 and 2017 alone, and it is still climbing to keep up with global demand for meat and milk. Which raises an obvious question. Why do cows, of all animals, burp out so much of this gas in the first place? The answer is in their stomachs, or more precisely, in one very unusual stomach chamber called the rumen. A cow has 4 stomach compartments, and the rumen is essentially a giant fermentation tank, holding tens of gallons of half-digested plant matter at any given moment. Inside that tank live trillions of microbes working to break down tough plant fiber that a cow's own body could never digest on its own. Some of those microbes, a group called methanogens, produce methane as a natural byproduct of that fermentation, and the cow simply burps most of it back out. Think of it a little like a compost pile or a batch of beer fermenting. Break down organic material without oxygen, and methane is one of the natural byproducts. It is not the cow doing anything wrong. It is just basic biology, running at a scale of hundreds of millions of animals. Ever noticed how cattle get singled out so often in climate conversations, sometimes even compared directly to cars and airplanes? That comparison is not entirely fair. Cars do not burp digestive gas, but it captures something real. Livestock is a genuinely large piece of the climate puzzle. For decades, researchers have been hunting for ways to shrink that piece, without asking anyone to give up meat or dairy overnight. Some approaches focus on breeding cows that naturally produce less methane. Others focus on improving pasture and forage quality, since better feed tends to ferment more efficiently. Other strategies try to manipulate the rumen directly, adjusting what is fermenting inside that stomach chamber to favor pathways that do not end in methane. But one idea has drawn more attention than almost any other in the last decade. A small molecule you can simply mix into a cow's feed. It is called 3-nitrooxypropanol, or 3-NOP for short, and in the dairy industry it goes by a commercial name you may have actually seen in headlines: Bovaer. Have you ever heard that name before, Bovaer, mentioned somewhere online or on the news? It has become one of the most talked about tools in the fight against agricultural methane, and also one of the most misunderstood. So what does it actually do, chemically, inside a cow? Methane-forming microbes in the rumen rely on one specific enzyme to complete the very last step of turning fermentation, byproducts, into methane gas. 3-NOP is shaped closely enough like the natural molecule that enzyme normally handles that it can slot directly into its active site instead, and jam it. With that final step blocked, the methanogen simply cannot finish the job unless methane escapes as a burp. Here is the part that surprises a lot of people. This is not a permanent fix. The moment a cow stops eating 3-NOP, its methane output climbs back to normal within days. The microbes are never killed, only temporarily blocked. Which means for this to work at scale, it has to be mixed into feed continuously, on every farm, every single day, for as long as the benefit matters. That raises a much harder question than the chemistry. Does it actually work well enough, consistently enough across real farms to be worth doing? For years, the honest answer was kind of, but nobody was fully sure by how much. Early trials were small, sometimes just a handful of cows, and results bounced around a lot from one study to the next. Was that bouncing around just random noise, or was something predictable driving it, like the dose used, or what the cows were actually eating that week? That is exactly the kind of question that gets answered not by one more small trial, but by pooling everything scientists already know into a single, larger picture. So a team of researchers set out to do exactly that for 3NOP, bringing together every credible dairy cattle trial they could find into one combined analysis. Before pooling anything, they had to be strict about what counted. Studies that only tested 3NOP in a lab dish, not a real cow, were left out. Reviews that just summarized other people's work, not original data, were left out too, along with studies that measured only manure emissions instead of the cow's own breath. Even a couple of studies that seemed to fit were excluded for a subtler reason. The way researchers dosed the cows in those trials did not match how farmers would actually feed 3NOP day to day. After all that filtering, 13 separate published trials made the cut, together covering 48 different feeding comparisons in real dairy cattle. Some of those trials measured methane, with sensors built right into automated feeding stations. Others used sealed, climate-controlled chambers that the cows walked into to breathe. A few even used a tracer gas technique, letting a cow swallow a small capsule that released a measurable gas alongside its own breath, so scientists could calculate methane output precisely. Whatever the method, the goal was the same: get an honest, direct measurement of how much methane each cow was actually producing, not an estimate. And here is something worth pausing on before the headline number. Every cow in these trials was also eating a slightly different diet, different amounts of fiber, fat, and starch. That detail turns out to matter more than almost anyone expected going in. So after combining everything, what did the numbers actually show? At a typical dose, around 70 milligrams of 3NOP for every kilogram of dry feed, methane production per cow dropped by 32.7%. Methane yield, how much gas came out per kilogram of feed the cow actually ate, dropped by 39%. And methane intensity, the amount of gas per kilogram of milk the cow produced, dropped by 32.6%. Three different ways of measuring the same effect, and all three landed in almost exactly the same place, roughly a third less methane. The dose mattered enormously. Feed a cow slightly more 3NOP, and the benefit grew almost proportionally, about another 8 percentage points of reduction for every extra 10 milligrams per kilogram. But diet composition could quietly work against the additive. Cows on higher fiber diets, or higher fat diets, got noticeably less benefit from the exact same dose. For every 10 grams of extra fiber per kilogram of feed above the average, the methane reduction shrank by roughly 0.6 to 0.9 percentage points, depending on what else was in the mix. Diets higher in starch, on the other hand, seemed to help the additive work slightly better for methane yield specifically. Put together, dose and diet let the researchers build a full mathematical model, not just a single headline percentage, but an equation that predicts roughly how much methane a specific farm, with its specific feed formula, could expect to cut. That kind of precision matters beyond the lab. Those same equations can plug directly into carbon accounting tools and farm emissions reports, turning a chemistry result into something a real dairy operation can actually use. It is also worth comparing this to what came before. An earlier analysis back in 2018 estimated a similar reduction, but it leaned on only 5 studies, mostly mixing beef and dairy cattle together. With more than double the trials and a dairy-only focus, this newer analysis came out with slightly stronger numbers across the board, a reminder that these estimates keep sharpening as more farms get tested. None of this, though, answers every question people might have about an additive like this. This particular analysis only measured one thing: methane leaving the cow. It says nothing directly about long-term animal health, milk composition, or consumer safety, questions that matter, but that belong to entirely separate research, not this dataset. What it does confirm is narrower, and arguably just as important. Under real feeding conditions, this molecule reliably blocks roughly a third of a dairy cow's methane, as long as it stays in the trough. So the next time you hear a cow let out that quiet, ordinary burp, there is now a real number attached to it, and for the first time, a real chemical answer for how to shrink it.